I love saying this. The Trojans are surging, and the Ducks lost another commitment.
You are Locked On USC, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I am your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC. It's part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day. Whether you're watching the show on YouTube, wherever you want to download this podcast, this show is always going to be free, and this show is always going to appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in this episode. There is so much recruiting information happening right now. In case you haven't heard, USC now has the #1 recruiting class on the 3 major recruiting networks. On 3, finally joined 247 and Rivals, and it happened when USC picked up a stud, and Oregon happened to lose one. Same day, happened. So all of a sudden, USC surges forward, and they have the #1 class in the cycle of 2026. On yesterday's episode, I said, well, who could possibly be getting ready to make a commitment? USC has been dropping some hints, doing their social media thing. The latest hint was Polynesian. And I threw out a couple names. It was not Samuel Utu. It was not Malachi Lee. But USC did get an offensive line commitment. And it was a Polynesian player. And he's a big one. Not just figuratively speaking either. I mean, literally. Mammoth. Huge. Monster. He's from Mountain View, California. St. Francis High School. His name is John Fafita. Offensive lineman. He announced his verbal commitment on Monday. In fact, Monday afternoon. And it was a really simple, put it out there on Twitter. Quote, first, I want to thank God for the many blessings he's provided and thank my parents, family, and coaches for all the support and time they invested in me. With that being said, I am 100% committed. And I'll tell you what, it did not take this young man long at all to make his decision. A few days ago, he took an unofficial visit to USC, received an offer, and I would have assumed before the weekend was over, he knew USC was the place to be. Monday afternoon, he's like, hey, I want to be a Trojan. I told you he's big, massive, huge, 6'6", 350 pounds. Yeah. Interior offensive lineman. Could he play tackle? I do know that in this recruiting class, compared to what USC brought in with their last recruiting class, they needed to kind of focus in on the interior side of the ball. As far as the offensive line, excuse me, they're focusing on the interior guys. So Fafita, first guy in, hopefully that starts the snowball momentum there. But wait, there's more. I'm like your sham wow guy right now. So back when USC held their junior day, February 1st, I tweeted out a little prematurely that the Oaks Christian running back who was there, Deshaun Rideau, that he was committed to the class. I jumped the gun a little bit. Still, a couple of weeks later, Deshaun, he cut his school list down to Georgia, Michigan, UCLA, Oregon, USC, and Washington. Okay, those were the final schools he was going to pick from. On three's Steve Wiltfong, he put in his prediction for USC, 3 weeks ago, I think it was. Well, wearesc.com, Scott Schrader, Eric McKinney, the powers that be over there, they jumped on that bandwagon on Monday, and they put their prediction in that Deshaun is going to pick USC. Good day, right? He hasn't committed yet, but when you've got all these people in the know going in, pushing their chips to the middle of the table, it's usually a good sign. So Deshaun is the number 115th overall best prospect in the On3 300. He's considered the number 12 running back in the cycle, and he's also the number 14 overall player in the state of California. So again, USC is focusing on their backyard. So if you thought that was cool, the day then really got interesting. USC was not done. And Scott Schrader, he wasn't done dropping nuggets over there on the WeRC.com website. By the way, spend $1. Go check it out. You'll get a week's worth. And you'll probably say, you know what? Let me just keep renewing the subscription. Well, USC had a bunch of guys on campus Monday for some unofficial visits. Here's just a few of them. How about tight end Mark Bowman from Mater Dei? Yeah, he was there. He was back. So was current Oregon commitment, defensive tackle, Mater Dei, Tom Tapui. He was hanging out with Mark Bowman on USC's campus. Both of those guys were at USC's junior day. Well, they decided to show up again on Monday. And this was just another, hey, I'm just going to hang out, stop by type of thing. Whether they were asked or not, I don't know. But USC's close enough. So you've got these guys showing up for an unofficial visit. They already have, I know Bowman has another unofficial visit set later this spring. And then both of those guys are going to be taking their official visit together to USC June 17th. And remind everybody, I've mentioned this before, that June 17th through 19th window, that 2-day official visit group, it's small, but these are their high priority targets. I'm talking about Brandon Arrington, Kini Pepe, Talanoa Ely, Havon Finney, Tom Mark Bowman. And so you had Bowman on campus, just kind of walking around, soaking things up. You had Tom. I know he was hanging out with certain coaches. Everybody was visiting the Coliseum. This was kind of a day like, hey, are you in? They weren't putting him on the spot saying commit, but they were making them an offer they couldn't refuse. Let me just put it that way. So you had those guys on campus, and then you also had linebacker. His name is Wasi Lugo Lobi. I love saying that name, Lugo Lobi. Wasi Lugo Lobi. He's from Sammamish, Washington. He plays for Eastside Catholic High School. He's a linebacker, 6'1", 210 pounds. He committed to Washington back in November, but he came to USC's junior day, February 1st, and then he was back again on Monday for another unofficial visit. I believe he also has an official visit set up in June. I can't remember off the top of my head which weekend. Nevertheless, USC's rolling. So we'll see what happens. I'm starting to feel a lot more confident with Bowman. I'm feeling much more confident with Tom. And as I mentioned, Oregon lost a commitment. We're going to talk about that in the next segment because USC has right now the consensus number 1 recruiting class in the 2026 cycle. I want to tell you how they got there. But first, we got to do this. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College Basketball experts are picking one team that stands out, from top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets. These guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada and clear-cut Team of the Week are the Duke Blue Devils. The Blue Devils, check this out. This stat is amazing when you think about it. They were a plus 434 points in the ACC conference. Okay, in ACC conference play, they outscored their opponents by 434 points. That's the largest point differential by a power conference team in league play since Kentucky back in 1953-54. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer. And that's exactly what the Duke Blue Devils have done this year. it's clear that our team of the week is out here ready to conquer the road, and they've got a lot of like you can have in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of the other Nissan outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. So as of March 10th, and I know you're watching this episode, making your first listen, your first watch on March 11th, USC has the #1 recruiting class in the 2026 recruiting cycle. That's per On3, that's per 247, that's according to Rivals. These are USC's 11 committed players. They're verbal commitments. But you've got John Fafita, you have Samodi Kadanga, you have Jonas Williams, decommit from Oregon. He's USC's quarterback, one of the quarterbacks. You have Xavier Griffin. You've got RJ Sermons. How about Braden Jones and Brandon Lockhart and Madden Reardon, Joshua Holland, Sean Alston, Andrew Williams, and you have wide receiver Jamiron Tron Baker. So USC got the #1 class beginning of the week. Meanwhile, Oregon, who has already lost their quarterback commit, Jonas Williams, to USC, they lost another commitment. And this one was a 4-star. Defensive lineman Bot Mulitalo. He decided Monday morning he didn't want to be a Duck anymore. He'd rather see who else is out there. This is probably going to come down to Washington versus USC. But right now, USC stands above Oregon. USC's class, and I'm using the On3 metrics right now, they have the average rating of 94.1, Oregon 94.218. And how On3 calculates it, they try and they pull your top 5 commitments in each class. And that way it kind of avoids giving extra credit to teams who have more commitments than other schools. So USC's top 5 is better than Oregon's top 5 is what this comes down to. With that being said, USC has, I think, 12 total commitments in 2026, 11, whatever that number is. Excuse me. So they moved into the #1 spot when Bot decided to decommit from Oregon. USC picks up John Fafita. Flip-flop, USC jumps up. What's interesting about this is the reason why Bot decommitted. Oregon wants him to play defensive line. He's 6'3.5", 265 pounds. He's scheduled to take an official visit to USC the weekend of June 6th through the 8th. And that's actually one of the bigger official visit weekends for the Trojans this year. So here's what's cool about this. Right after Bot changed his mind about being an Oregon Duck, USC commit, Samodi, defensive lineman, he tweeted at him, says, "You know where home is," and he threw up a couple of these in his tweet. I mentioned Oregon wants Bot to play defensive line. Bot wants to play offensive line in college. That's why people are speculating why he made the decommitment. Oregon wasn't listening, wasn't hearing him. You got to listen. So right now, USC has one interior defensive lineman committed in this class. That would be Braden Jones from Chicago. More are on the way. Don't get me wrong, but like I said, Samodi might be tweeting at him, "Hey, you know where home is." That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be playing defensive line in college. He wants to play offensive line. And since we're talking about offensive linemen and guys who don't want to play at Oregon, there is a guy who is committed. He's an offensive tackle. His name's Cody Green, plays at Mater Dei. He's from the Pacific Northwest. He's committed to Oregon right now. He is going to be taking a visit to USC. We'll see where that goes. USC is going to have to really step up to get Cody to have a change of heart. There's a long ways to go, but USC is surging ahead. They got the #1 class. They're getting guys to decommit from other programs, giving them a second look. Let me just remind everybody. USC's general manager, Chad Bowden, said USC is going to take their largest high school recruiting class in the history of USC. We'll see if Bott is going to eventually be a part of that group when we get closer to signing day. So who is going to be the next commit? Who's going to join USC's #1 recruiting class? You know, I like to use the F word a lot around here when it comes to recruiting. The F word stands for fluid, which means things are always in motion. So as of today, here's a list of players who are on the getting ready to pull that ripcord. They're on that list. They're getting ready to make that commitment to USC. You can choose from Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Diakonov, Ryder Lyons, offensive tackle up there at Folsom. I mentioned Deshaun Rideau. I think when Scott Schrader decides to go in and put his crystal ball commitment in, things are about to happen. What about Kari Wilder? What about Trent Mosley, the wide receiver, Modi's teammate at Santa Margarita Catholic? It's possible. Malachi Lee, I mentioned his name. Samuel Utu, I mentioned his name. Those are the guys who most feel are getting ready, the closest. So usually when you're looking at all those, the big names are out there on the big board, that typically doesn't always work out that way. It'll end up being some cat out of nowhere, a guy like a John Fafita who steps up and makes a commitment to USC. But we'll take anybody right now, right? Doesn't matter who. You want to get on the train, you want to jump on the bandwagon, get on. Be like the USC fans, be a bandwagoner. When things are going well, everybody wants to be around USC. Regardless of who commits and when it happens, as I said at the top of the show, USC is surging on the recruiting trail right now. And Oregon fans, they're butthurt. They're getting nervous for good reason. And it's not just Oregon. The rest of the country's starting to take notice. Oh, they're doing that. Uh-oh. The sleeping giants waking up. Be quiet. Don't make them mad. Because when a giant gets mad, they like to wreck things. And USC football, when they're wrecking things, that's usually a good thing. So again, it kind of feels like, it kind of looks like USC's figured out California recruiting again. And they've got our good friends up there who like to wear flannel, maybe shower once a week, think that, they're a college football blue blood when they're not. That program up north called Oregon. Yeah, well, they're coping. They're trying to figure out why USC's ahead of them. And they're basically saying, well, we didn't want him anyways. Let him go to USC. That's a coping mechanism. This is why I will always say to my last dying breath, the Duck fan base, they're still and will always be the least sophisticated fan base in the country. This is that is a program that literally thinks they belong in the same with USC, Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, Oklahoma, the Blue Bloods. Guess what? USC is back. They've got their stuff lined up in a row. All the dominoes are in place. And they're starting to take over recruiting again. I get it. It's March. Saying you're #1 in March means absolutely nothing. But today, in today's recruiting world, it actually means a lot. Especially with NIL and especially with revenue sharing coming up. Today's the 2026 recruiting class, they're keeping an eye on what's going on. Because once these rules come down, where there's a cap And this is how much, everything's got to be transparent. There's going to be a clearinghouse with NIL. Things are going to start changing. So that's why you see everybody locking in their spots now, jumping in, committing, taking advantage of while the money's out there. Because once these rules come into play, that money's not going to be free flowing anymore. And no matter how much Phil Knight and that collective has going on up there, USC has the resources in play. They're ready to compete again. And it's showing. They got the #1 recruiting class. All right, one more segment to go. Attention, Locked On USC fans. The future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happened under the table, and fans didn't really have a clear way to directly support the athletes they love. Now, with Roy, you get to be a part of the change and support USC athletes in the most transparent way possible. The NIL app allows you to do this. You get to choose the player you want to support. You get to decide how much to contribute, and you also get to receive exclusive content from the athletes that you're backing up. And the best part, if your player transfers, you're going to get your money back. It's risk-free to show your support, and you're not going to feel bad that you made a donation and all of a sudden Bear Alexander decided he didn't want to be a Trojan anymore. The Roy app is giving fans control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and the future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing up USC athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. How much of last season's gut punch losses, how much of last season is going to carry over into the 2025 season? What I mean is all of those tough losses, how many of those are going to turn into wins this upcoming season? We've gone over the schedule, and I'll do it again many, many times before USC kicks off against Missouri State. But despite those final results, I don't think anybody wants to make the claim that USC did not play hard or compete up until the final whistle of every game. They were in every game. I mean, think about those losses. The loss to Notre Dame. And I know the Irish's schedule was one-ply toilet paper. But defensively, Notre Dame was pretty solid, right? USC's offense did pretty much what it wanted for the most part in that game. The running game could have been better. But Jaden, he kind of went ham on that team. I know about the 2 pick sixes. I remember them very clearly. I was there. And the second one actually happened right in front of me when I was on the field. But they say you learn from your mistakes, right? Those guys who were on the team last year who are returning, the guys who went through that experience, they're going to remember those experiences. And they're going to remember how to handle those situations better when faced, when faced with those similar situations. I mean, think that close loss to Michigan, it was a year after the Wolverines won the national championship. Learning how to win is actually, it's something you have to teach yourself. It just doesn't happen. There's literally a trip, fall over, bang your knee process. Okay, don't do that, so you'll have a better result the next time. Michigan had to learn how to win. They eventually got there. You had that overtime loss at home to Penn State. So again, Michigan the year before, college football playoff national champions. Penn State in 2024 made it to the college football playoff semifinals. USC played them into overtime. USC should have won that game. I mean, Penn State, they made it to the semifinals. We know USC played pretty much step for step with Notre Dame, who lost to Ohio State for the whole shebang. USC has the talent to play with elite teams. They showed that last year. They're going to have even more talent in 2025. Look, this is why Coach Riley kept saying last year that they were close. Remember? We're close. Play here, play there. Those losses show that USC was close to being championship competitive. But that's all they were. They were close. But they were close, but they were still far enough away to make it feel like any mistake they made was going to put them behind the 8 ball. And it did. They were literally on a razor thin margin. They had guys on defense to make plays, but they didn't have enough guys. They didn't have the depth. Where, ironically, you had all that on the offensive side of the ball, but that was the side of the ball that seemed to be herky-jerky. The running game was working, didn't use it enough. The passing game was working, and then sometimes you used it too much. So again, I'm not sure how Coach Riley corrects the late game decision-making things and the execution on the field. That's just something you kind of have to kind of drive the message home over and over again. Play smart, make good decisions. Show them on film why they did that and why they shouldn't do that again. I don't know how you fix pick sixes from both quarterbacks. I'm not just talking about Jaden Mayava against Notre Dame. Miller Moss had an issue as well. I don't know how you fix, a safety coming over in the transfer portal and then losing his man in coverage for touchdowns. I mean, those are just a few of the ways USC lost games last year. Close games. The greatest inventors and the greatest minds in the history of the world, like guys like Einstein, they know that making mistakes is learning what not to do next time. What's the old saying? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. It's a sign of insanity. It's crazy. Again, you learn by making mistakes. Let me give you a quick anecdote before we get out of here. I might have told the story before, but again, my everydayers, you might appreciate it. If you're a new viewer, new listener, and you're watching on YouTube, click that red subscribe button. It's going to help. Smash that thumbs up because you like the show, and click that bell notification so you don't miss any information on any episode, because I'm coming at you 5 times a week. So in high school, I was taking an English composition class, and we had a project, and we were able to partner up with somebody in class. Anyways, me and my partner, we decided we were going to turn in 2 papers. One as a joke and one for the real grade. Well, the teacher didn't appreciate the joke, and he sent us to the vice principal's office. When you get sent to the vice principal's office, that means you're in trouble. You're going to be suspended for a day, at least for a day. Anyways, went home, had to tell parents what happened. And I said, look, Dad, Jeff said he was going to take responsibility. Dad looked at me like, all right, Mark, go to the kitchen. Okay. Walk to the kitchen. Dad walks behind me. Dad says, turn on the stove. Gas burner. Said, okay. I'm not sure where we're going with this. All of a sudden, my dad goes, give me your hand. I was like, why? He goes, don't worry. I'll take responsibility. Message received. Lesson learned. Don't make that mistake. That was the whole point of this. Don't make the same mistake twice. All right. That's it for this episode of Locked on USC. I'll be back again tomorrow. I have a feeling I'm going to have some more recruiting news because that's what's going on right now. And I cannot tell you how much fun is it to say the Trojans are surging. Yeah. It's a good time right now. USC is back at the top where they belong. Oregon is looking up, saying, I want to be like USC. Well, we'll see what happens when signing day finally rolls around in December. But I like the direction USC is going. They're doing all the right things. They're getting guys on campus for as many unofficial visits as possible. And then they've got guys like Chad Bowden walking one-on-one with Tom across the Coliseum grass. One-on-one, just having that conversation. That's the type of stuff that's happening right now. All right. That next episode will be here tomorrow. So until then, everyone, you know what to do.